He mistakenly activated alien princess's Melons. Now she won't let him leave. Captain Jason Reynolds had always thought intergalactic diplomacy was dull, endless meetings filled with bureaucratic jargon and forced pleasantries. When command assigned him as the diplomatic liaison aboard the starship Aurora, he prepared himself for days of monotony, handshakes, and fake smiles. He had no idea just how spectacularly wrong he was. It all started with his first official meeting aboard the Zalarian flagship. Jason stood awkwardly in the massive greeting chamber, flanked by alien dignitaries whose slender lavender bodies glistened softly under artificial sunlight. Their serene demeanor was a stark contrast to his battle-hardened form. Around him, countless orbs floated, glowing faintly, presumably decoration, though Jason had no clue what purpose they served. He adjusted his tight-fitting Alliance dress uniform uncomfortably, scanning the crowd. As the ambassador droned on about mutual cooperation, Jason's attention wandered to a figure standing apart, silently observing him from beneath an ornate archway. She was unmistakably Xylarian royalty. Every graceful line of her body screamed elegance and authority. Her long silver hair cascaded down her shoulders, framing an arrestingly beautiful face that regarded him coolly with luminous emerald eyes. His heart skipped unexpectedly. "Princess Illyria," whispered a nearby dignitary reverently. "She rarely attends these gatherings." Jason's curiosity intensified. His briefing had barely mentioned the princess, noting only her aloof reputation. Their eyes met across the crowded chamber, and he instantly understood why she'd captivated him. She radiated both mystery and power. As the tedious welcome ceremony concluded, Jason's commanding officer nudged him forward. "Captain Reynolds, the princess wishes to speak privately." Surprised, Jason approached hesitantly. Illyria watched him carefully, her eyes appraising him like a rare specimen. "You are Captain Jason Reynolds, the human assigned as liaison?" Her voice was soft, musical, yet edged with unmistakable skepticism. "That's right, Your Highness," Jason replied, keeping his voice respectfully neutral. She narrowed her eyes, studying him closely. "They say your species is curious and impulsive, yet the Alliance believes you are suitable for diplomacy?" "Strange." He raised an eyebrow slightly. "Strange. Humans," she said softly, a faint smile playing at her lips, "often misunderstand what is harmless to others. Curiosity becomes calamity." Before Jason could ask what she meant, Illyria turned gracefully, beckoning him to follow. Intrigued yet wary, he followed her deeper into the vessel. Ornate corridors gave way to lush chambers filled with glowing plants, shimmering gently beneath violet-tinted skylights. Illyria paused beside an enormous plant, tall as a human, with massive green globes hanging heavily from its vines. "Fascinating," Jason murmured, forgetting decorum briefly as he reached out to touch one of the large fruits. "Are these?" Illyria quickly moved to intercept him, her eyes widening sharply. "Do not—" Too late. Jason's fingertips brushed the largest globe. A soft, radiant pulse erupted instantly, bathing him and the princess in an unexpected surge of emerald energy. The sensation was like nothing he'd experienced, warm, tingling, and oddly pleasant. But as quickly as it came, the energy vanished, leaving them both momentarily stunned. "What did you just do?" Illyria gasped, her composure slipping into genuine panic. Jason withdrew his hand immediately, looking confused. I'm sorry, I had no idea." Before his eyes, the princess's body began to glow gently. She closed her eyes, trembling slightly. Her previously subtle curves began to shift visibly beneath her flowing gown, becoming distinctly more prominent. Jason's heart raced with confusion and panic. Did he just harm an alien royal? "Princess, what's happening?" Illyria opened her eyes, which now burned fiercely with both embarrassment and annoyance. Her hands protectively covered her noticeably enhanced chest as she stared daggers at Jason. "You have activated my Shalari," she hissed, her lavender cheeks flushed deep violet. "They respond only to intense emotional resonance, usually during ceremonial mating rituals." Jason's jaw dropped open. "You're... what?" She gestured angrily to her chest, her voice filled with exasperation. My Melons, as humans might crudely say, you have mistakenly triggered their growth. This is utterly humiliating. Jason quickly stepped back, raising his hands defensively. I swear I had no idea. It was an accident. I was just curious. Illyria shook her head sharply, still shielding herself. I warned you about human curiosity, Captain. What do we do now? Jason asked cautiously, desperately trying to maintain eye contact and avoid further embarrassment. She sighed deeply, her shoulders sagging slightly as the glow faded. You must understand, the activation is irreversible without proper ritual resolution. Until then, our emotional states remain bound. Jason blinked slowly. Bound? Meaning what exactly? She looked away, embarrassed but resolute. Meaning, Captain Reynolds, I can sense your feelings, and you mine. Until we perform the ritual to reverse this, I cannot allow you to leave my side. He swallowed nervously, realizing the gravity of the situation. Can't we just tell them it was an accident? I'm sure they'll understand. Illyria glared at him, her tone icy. My people value emotional intimacy above all else. Revealing this would be scandalous. Do you understand? We must resolve it privately. Jason ran a hand through his hair, sighing heavily. Great. First day of diplomacy and I've already caused an interstellar incident. The princess's expression softened slightly, noticing his genuine remorse. You're not entirely at fault. Perhaps I misjudged your intentions. Still, we must move quickly. Every moment intensifies our bond. Wait, Jason frowned. Intensifies? She nodded reluctantly, cheeks flushing again. The longer we're connected, the stronger our mutual attraction will become, physically, emotionally, uncontrollably. Jason's pulse quickened as he absorbed her words. You're saying we might not be able to control ourselves? Illyria's lips curled slightly despite her embarrassment. Exactly. Your curiosity, Captain, has placed us in considerable trouble. He met her gaze firmly, resolve hardening. Then we'll fix this together. Just tell me what needs to happen. She hesitated, suddenly shy. The ritual requires a deep, emotional connection, one normally shared between bonded lovers. He exhaled slowly, understanding the full scope of their dilemma. And there's no other way? She shook her head slowly. None. Jason steadied himself, determination overriding embarrassment. Then we'll find a way to do this respectfully. I promise you, Princess, I'll do whatever it takes to undo this. For the first time, Illyria's stern mask cracked, replaced by gratitude and cautious warmth. Perhaps you're not as reckless as you appear, Captain. He smiled slightly, tension easing. Just impulsively curious, apparently. Their shared laughter eased the tension momentarily, and Jason felt an unexpected warmth growing between them. The bond, accidental though it was already becoming undeniable. He straightened, expression serious once more. Where do we begin? Illyria took a deep breath, steadying herself. First, we must leave unnoticed. The ceremony tonight provides the perfect distraction. He nodded sharply. Lead the way. As they moved swiftly from the chamber, Jason reflected that perhaps diplomacy wasn't dull after all. He'd expected monotony, yet he found himself entangled, quite literally, with an alien princess whose beauty was matched only by her strength. Together, they navigated shadowed corridors toward her private quarters, hearts racing with uncertainty, embarrassment, and growing fascination. Neither fully understood the depth of the connection they'd inadvertently forged, or the profound impact it would soon have on two worlds. And as Jason walked beside Illyria, feeling their emotions mingle irresistibly, he realized one thing with crystal clarity. His life aboard the Xylarian flagship was about to become far more complicated and infinitely more exciting than he'd ever imagined. Jason Reynolds followed Princess Illyria down the shadowed corridors of the Xylarian flagship, his mind racing with 1,000 chaotic thoughts. Every step brought waves of embarrassment and guilt, mingled oddly with fascination. Glancing sideways, he caught Illyria's lavender cheeks still flushed darkly, clearly struggling to maintain her royal composure after his catastrophic curiosity had activated her assets. She led him to a door etched with intricate glyphs. It slid open noiselessly, revealing a luxurious suite bathed in soft, violet hues. Jason hesitated at the threshold, unsure whether protocol even permitted a human to enter the royal chambers, much less under such scandalous circumstances. "Come inside," she whispered hurriedly. "We cannot risk anyone discovering us." He stepped quickly through the doorway, feeling a strange thrill ripple through their emotional bond as the doors hissed closed behind him. They were alone now, completely alone. Illyria moved to a nearby reflective surface, frowning at her altered reflection. Her previously modest figure had blossomed into curves clearly noticeable even through her elegant gown. Jason coughed awkwardly, staring intently at the polished floor. I'm really sorry about this, Your Highness." "Stop apologizing," she said sharply, yet her tone softened almost immediately. "It's done. Our priority now is reversing the effect." Jason lifted his gaze cautiously. "How exactly do we perform this ritual you mentioned?" Illyria's violet flush deepened considerably. "The ritual involves intense emotional resonance. We must share experiences of intimacy and trust, something ordinarily reserved for bonded mates." Jason swallowed hard, heart thundering with sudden nervousness. "And we're sure there's no other way?" She shook her head slowly, eyes glancing away shyly. "The Shalari activation is powerful. Only by fully embracing our connection can we reverse it." Jason's pulse quickened. He took a cautious step toward her. "You said this bond grows stronger. I can already feel your embarrassment, your uncertainty, even your anger at me." She turned abruptly, eyes wide. "You truly feel it?" He nodded. "Yes, it's faint, but it's definitely there." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Then our bond is progressing rapidly, faster than I thought." Jason hesitated, searching her expression carefully. "You're feeling my emotions too?" She nodded reluctantly. "You're ashamed, but you're also fascinated, curious, even attracted." She glanced away, adding softly, "It's strangely comforting." Jason chuckled nervously. "Comforting?" Illyria met his eyes directly, expression surprisingly vulnerable. "Knowing we share these feelings makes this situation somewhat bearable." A brief silence passed between them, tension melting slightly beneath mutual understanding. Jason broke it gently. "So, how exactly do we start this ritual?" She bit her lip softly, embarrassment clear. "The ritual begins by sharing deep, personal truths, something you've never shared before. It opens emotional pathways, strengthening trust." Jason moved closer, nodding. "All right, I'll start." She tilted her head curiously, waiting. He exhaled deeply, gathering his courage. "Back on Earth, before I joined the Alliance fleet, I was terrified of space travel. I nearly quit officer training twice." Illyria's eyes widened in surprise. "You? Terrified?" He nodded solemnly. "My family thought I was fearless, and I hated disappointing them. But I eventually faced that fear, because I wanted to make them proud." She smiled gently, visibly touched. "I never imagined you could feel such vulnerability, Captain." "Jason," he corrected softly, "if we're sharing truths, let's start by dropping formalities." She hesitated briefly, then nodded. "Very well, Jason." She paused, cheeks darkening. "Now my turn." He waited patiently as she drew a shaky breath. "As heir, I was never allowed friendships or intimacy. My life was strictly controlled. Every action observed. I've been desperately lonely, but I hid it beneath a mask of indifference." Jason felt her loneliness clearly, the emotion flowing through their bond vividly. "I'm sorry, Illyria. That sounds isolating." She looked away, voice trembling. "It is. Until today, no one saw past that mask. Yet now you know the truth." Jason gently took her hand, squeezing softly. "I'm honored you shared it." She glanced down at their joined hands, warmth spreading visibly across her lavender skin. "It's strange. I barely know you, yet I already feel closer to you than anyone in my life." He smiled tenderly. "Maybe the bond isn't entirely a bad thing." She laughed quietly, leaning into his touch subconsciously. "Perhaps not entirely." Their connection flared stronger, emotions mingling freely. Jason felt her hesitation vanish, replaced by growing trust, and beneath it, a spark of genuine attraction, neither fully understood yet. We should continue the ritual, she whispered softly, voice unsteady. The next step requires physical contact. Jason stiffened slightly, heart thundering. What kind of physical contact? She hesitated, cheeks deepening to almost indigo. A kiss. It completes the first stage of intimacy, solidifying emotional resonance. He studied her carefully, sensing nervousness but also anticipation. Only if you're certain. Illyria lifted her chin, determination glinting in emerald eyes. We must. Slowly, gently, he cupped her cheek, fingertips brushing her warm skin. Their eyes locked, hearts synchronizing instinctively. Jason leaned in carefully, feeling her breath quicken. The instant their lips touched, emotional intensity surged wildly. Warmth exploded between them, spiraling their bond far beyond mere obligation. They pressed closer, exploring newfound intimacy. Every sensation doubled through their empathic connection. After several breathless moments, they parted, breathing heavily. Illyria's emerald eyes glowed softly, dazed but pleased. That was unexpectedly pleasant. Jason chuckled quietly, brushing hair gently from her flushed face. Agreed. Yet as the intensity subsided slightly, Jason glanced downward, startled. Illyria, she followed his gaze, gasping softly. Instead of reversing, her enhanced figure had become even more pronounced, straining visibly beneath her gown. This shouldn't happen, she stammered, blushing furiously. He frowned, confused. Did we do something wrong? She shook her head helplessly. Perhaps the bond isn't satisfied with mere emotional resonance. It demands greater intimacy. Jason's pulse skyrocketed. Greater intimacy, you mean? She nodded slowly, looking mortified. Yes, deeper bonding. Otherwise, the Shalari will keep enhancing, potentially indefinitely. Jason ran a hand through his hair, disbelief evident. You're saying we need to fully bond, or this problem gets bigger? Illyria groaned softly, embarrassment palpable. Exactly. Jason stepped back, pacing anxiously. We can't do that. It's too soon. We barely know each other. She sighed, clearly conflicted. I know, but every moment strengthens this bond. Soon we won't resist it, Jason. He stopped pacing abruptly, meeting her worried eyes seriously. Then we'll slow it down. We'll find a way to control it, to buy us time. She looked skeptical yet hopeful. Do you truly believe that's possible? He moved closer again, confidence radiating through their bond. Together? Absolutely. Relief flooded her expression. She reached for his hand, interlacing their fingers. Then we must move quickly. There is one who might help us, a trusted mentor who knows ancient Xylarian secrets. Perhaps he can reverse this. Good, Jason said, squeezing her hand reassuringly. Let's find him. As they slipped quietly from her quarters, Jason's mind spun wildly. Despite everything, his catastrophic mistake, the humiliation, and the bizarre intimacy, the bond connecting them felt undeniably right. Real even. He glanced at Illyria, now leading confidently. She felt his attention and glanced back, smiling shyly, emerald eyes filled with warmth. Suddenly, Jason understood this connection wasn't just biological or emotional, it was destiny. Together, they'd navigate this strange, embarrassing path, and perhaps uncover something extraordinary along the way. Princess Illyria moved swiftly through the winding corridors of the flagship, Jason Reynolds at her side. Every passing second intensified their strange empathic bond, emotions spilling freely between them. Embarrassment lingered beneath it all, but so did excitement and undeniable attraction, drawing them closer despite their resolve. Jason struggled not to stare at her increasingly enhanced figure. The unexpected growth continued, much to her visible discomfort and his equally visible fascination. Yet beneath the awkwardness was something deeper, a warmth building steadily between them. This mentor you mentioned, Jason asked quietly, keeping his voice low as they hurried. Can he really reverse this? Illyria glanced sideways, nodding cautiously. Master Valaris is wise in ancient customs. If anyone can undo the Shalari bond, It's him. They reached a discreet alcove, pausing briefly. Jason instinctively placed a protective hand on her back, drawing her gently closer. She glanced up, blushing slightly, yet leaning comfortably into his touch. "We must hurry," she murmured, pulling away reluctantly. "The bond grows stronger. I feel your emotions clearly now." He chuckled softly. "You're embarrassed, frustrated, but also intrigued." She smiled faintly. "Precisely. Your feelings are equally vivid. I sense your guilt, your concern, but also your genuine attraction." He ran a hand through his hair sheepishly. "Can't exactly hide that." She laughed quietly, tension easing slightly. "Strangely, I find your honesty comforting." He smiled warmly. "Good, because it's all I've got right now." With mutual determination, they pressed forward, finally arriving at a secluded chamber decorated with intricate glowing symbols. Illyria activated the door, and they entered cautiously. Inside sat an elderly Xylarian man, Valeris. His silver hair framed a thoughtful, serene expression. Seeing them enter, he raised one delicate eyebrow. "Princess Illyria and a human?" he questioned, clearly surprised yet intrigued. Jason bowed respectfully. "Captain Jason Reynolds, sir, Alliance Liaison." Valeris studied them both carefully, eyes narrowing slightly in amused understanding. "I sense the emotional turmoil. You've accidentally activated the Shalari, haven't you?" Illyria blushed deeply. "Yes, Master Valeris. Can you help us?" He sighed softly, gesturing for them to sit. "The Shalari are profoundly powerful, meant for bonded mates. Reversing it is difficult, though not impossible." Jason and Illyria exchanged hopeful glances. "However," Valeris continued, "it requires you both to confront and embrace your true feelings. The bond must be fully satisfied before it dissipates." Jason frowned slightly. "Fully satisfied? Meaning?" Valeris smiled kindly. "True intimacy, physical and emotional. Your connection must mature naturally, fully. Only then can it be undone." Jason shifted nervously, heart racing. "There's no other way?" Valeris shook his head slowly. "You can delay, but never reverse it fully without embracing what you both feel." Illyria turned toward Jason, looking conflicted. "This complicates things." He nodded gravely, sensing her turmoil clearly. "But it's our only hope." Valeris rose gracefully. "Take time, both of you. Meditate upon your connection. It will guide you. Embrace its truth." He exited quietly, leaving them alone again. Jason sighed deeply, meeting her troubled eyes. "Well, Princess, where do we go from here?" Illyria hesitated, then moved closer, taking his hand gently. "Perhaps we start by admitting what we feel." Jason squeezed her fingers tenderly. "All right, I'll start. When I first saw you, I was intrigued, drawn to your strength, your beauty, your fierce independence." She blushed shyly, heart fluttering clearly through their connection. "I noticed your bravery, your kindness beneath your bravado. But I never thought we'd connect so deeply." He smiled softly. "Neither did I. Yet, here we are." She nodded slowly, gaze dropping to the floor. "The Shalari bond amplifies attraction, but it cannot create feelings from nothing. What we feel was already there." Jason touched her cheek gently, guiding her gaze upwards again. "Then perhaps our accident wasn't entirely unfortunate." She leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. "Perhaps not." Their lips met again, softly, hesitantly at first, then deepening slowly. Warmth flooded through their connection, emotions intertwining irresistibly. They drew closer instinctively, fully surrendering this time to the growing bond. As they finally parted, breathing unevenly, Jason brushed hair gently from her flushed face. "I think we're in trouble." She laughed breathlessly, pressing closer. "Indeed, but I find myself welcoming it." Before they could move again, however, the chamber doors burst open abruptly. A tall, stern Xylarian officer entered, flanked by guards. "Princess Illyria," he announced coldly, "the council demands your immediate presence." She stiffened visibly, stepping protectively closer to Jason. "Why?" The officer eyed Jason suspiciously. There have been reports of unauthorized human interactions. Your father is displeased. Jason felt her fear spike sharply. We'll go together, he whispered reassuringly. I'll support you. She squeezed his hand gratefully, turning to face the officer calmly. Captain Reynolds remains by my side. The officer hesitated, clearly displeased. Very well, but be warned, human. Any misconduct will result in severe consequences. Jason held his gaze firmly. Understood. They were escorted silently through corridors, arriving at a grand chamber filled with stern council members. At its center stood King Alethar, Illyria's father, his expression thunderous. Daughter, he began icily, explain why this human accompanies you privately, violating our customs. Illyria stepped forward bravely. Father, this bond occurred by accident, but it is genuine, irreversible without proper ritual resolution. Elethar's eyes narrowed sharply. You bonded with a human. Do you understand what you've done? She raised her chin defiantly. I've found someone who truly understands me, something you've always denied me. Jason stepped forward protectively. Your Majesty, I apologize for this unintended consequence, but your daughter and I genuinely care for each other. Alethar studied him skeptically. Words are meaningless. Prove your sincerity. Jason nodded respectfully. How? Alethar smiled grimly. The trial of empathic unity, an ancient test of emotional resonance. Fail, and you'll never leave this ship. Jason felt Illyria tense beside him. Father, please, the trial is dangerous. Alethar raised his hand sharply. If your bond is genuine, you have nothing to fear. Jason met her anxious gaze steadily. We'll face it, together. She sighed softly, admiration mingling clearly with worry. Then let it be. Moments later, Jason and Illyria stood within a glowing circle, facing each other nervously as council members observed intently. Begin, Alethar commanded coldly. Immediately, intense waves of emotional energy bombarded them. Fear, doubt, suspicion. Jason stumbled slightly, disoriented, but then he felt Illyria's gentle presence reaching out through their bond, guiding him back. I'm here, she whispered softly into his mind, comforting him deeply. Trust our bond. He steadied himself, responding instinctively, always. Their emotions synchronized perfectly, fear fading beneath mutual trust. The observers murmured softly, astonished. The emotional waves intensified, but so did their connection, rapidly overpowering negativity. Embarrassment, shame, and doubt dissolved utterly, replaced entirely by warmth, trust, and undeniable affection. At last, the test ended abruptly, leaving them breathless yet victorious. Alethar regarded them with newfound respect. Your bond is indeed genuine. It defies our traditions, but perhaps it holds potential. Jason smiled gently at Illyria, squeezing her hand proudly. We intend to prove exactly that. Alethar sighed heavily, conceding reluctantly. Very well, but your path ahead is difficult. Many will oppose you. Illyria lifted her chin confidently. Together we'll overcome. Jason felt a rush of pride, affection blossoming fully within their bond. Whatever challenges awaited, they'd face them united. They'd begun this journey by mistake, but now they'd chosen it willingly. Together, they'd change the galaxy forever. In the quiet aftermath of their victory, Jason and Illyria stood on the balcony overlooking the shimmering expanse of space. Behind them, whispers echoed as the council members departed, still stunned by what they'd witnessed. Two species, human and Xylarian, forming an unbreakable bond stronger than tradition or prejudice. Illyria leaned gently against Jason, their bond resonating softly. Now a comforting presence, rather than an overwhelming force. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining naturally. She smiled softly, her emerald eyes filled with wonder. I never expected this, she whispered, her voice laced with gentle amazement. Jason chuckled softly, squeezing her hand affectionately. Accidentally activating ancient Xylarian bonding rituals wasn't exactly on my bucket list either. She laughed quietly, the sound sending pleasant ripples through their empathic link. Yet here we are, bonded for life. Jason tilted his head curiously. You don't regret it? She shook her head slowly, eyes shining with genuine affection. How could I? You've shown me what true connection means, what trust feels like. He smiled warmly, gently brushing hair away from her face. You taught me courage isn't just found on battlefields. It's found here. He touched his chest, then hers, between us. She blushed sweetly, her lavender cheeks darkening beautifully. And the, physical side effects? Jason cleared his throat, glancing downward awkwardly yet appreciatively. I've grown rather fond of them, truth be told. She laughed softly, her embarrassment mingling delightfully with shared humor. Then perhaps they're no longer entirely unwelcome. Their laughter faded gently into comfortable silence, gazing out at endless stars. Yet Jason sensed lingering hesitation radiating gently from Illyria. You're worried, he said gently, drawing her closer. She sighed softly, nodding. The council accepted us reluctantly, but our bond changes everything. Others may not be as understanding. Jason turned to face her fully, placing gentle hands on her shoulders. Then we'll face them together. Our unity can be the bridge to genuine peace. She smiled warmly, her emerald gaze holding deep admiration. You've become more than my protector, Jason. You've become my strength, my partner, my home. Jason's heart soared at her words, the intensity of emotion shared vividly through their bond. He pulled her closer gently, foreheads resting lightly together. And you, Illyria, have become the best accident of my life, he murmured affectionately. Their lips met tenderly, their bonds surging with an intensity deeper than mere passion. Their souls intertwined perfectly, the accidental bond blossoming into something genuine, powerful, and permanent. When they finally parted, breathless yet content, Jason noticed something subtly changing. Illyria's figure had returned slowly to its original, graceful proportions, though still unmistakably attractive. He grinned softly. Looks like the ritual finally achieved balance. Illyria glanced downward, relief evident in her eyes. Good. Perhaps now you'll stop staring. He laughed quietly, raising an eyebrow teasingly. Doubtful? She playfully pushed him, their easy banter echoing warmly through their shared connection. Suddenly, footsteps approached, interrupting their moment. They turned together, seeing Matriarch Virella standing respectfully in the doorway, expressions softer than they had ever seen. Princess, she began gently, Captain Reynolds, the council has deliberated. Given your unique bond, we've decided something unprecedented. Illyria tensed slightly, hand tightening around Jason's. Yes, Matriarch? Virella smiled softly, a rare display of genuine warmth. You will represent our new alliance, ambassadors of unity between our peoples. Your bond will be the example to guide future relations. Jason exhaled in relief, pride surging strongly through their connection. We won't let you down. The matriarch nodded approvingly. I believe you. As she departed quietly, Illyria released a shaky breath, leaning heavily against Jason. Ambassadors, do you believe we can truly change the galaxy?